Welcome to another episode of Let's Chat Eavesdrop Edition. My name is Joel. As you can see, we have full attendance today by everyone from the Scripture Union Youth Team. We have David, Zakwang, we have Yi Hong and Dylan. We also have Marianne, our youth team leader. Together with us, as you saw in episode 1 and episode for the other episodes as well, we had Daniel, Marianne's husband. Together with us, we also have my fiancé, Yifan, together with us. And we are here to have a conversation about relationships as we have had in our previous episodes. If you haven't already watched episode 1 through 4, this is episode 5. So go and watch episode 1 to 4, and then you can come back and watch this episode. Today, we are discussing how to deal with conflict in a relationship. So let's just start off with the married couple in our group today, Marianne and Daniel. As a married couple, is there still conflict? And, maybe you can tell us some stories if there is, or maybe why there isn't any conflict.
Yeah, I think we still have conflicts. Conflicts.
With a plural S.
Not the stuff you have for breakfast, yeah. Not conflicts.
Yeah.
Conflict.
I think because I think it's still two different individuals. We have different characters, we have different preference, and that kind of contribute to certain conflicts, like even as husband and wife when we live together. Yeah.
Let me give you an example. So Daniel and I, we just came back from doing relief work, by the way. So we went to this community and we were passing out certain things that were necessary for different households in the community. And so both of us were in a small little argument on our own. And of course, there was this refugee pastor taking us along. We were in this small little conflict saying like, okay, how should we best do this? Okay, do we need to get them to sign this? Do we need to so we were actually arguing anyways. And I think that conflict occurs daily, although we look like conflict-free couple on the surface. A lot of people will look at us and say, why you guys don't seem to have huge relationship issues? But I think that for us, conflict, even on like what to eat for dinner, who decides? This is the struggle of existence. What to eat for dinner every day is like it's also a source of conflict. But I do. I mean, and I don't know how many people are fans of Jordan Peterson. But I do take note that, in a sense that in a relationship, this is what he said, you want a partner who can challenge you, like who can actually inspire you to improve and better yourself, and who's not always in total agreement with you. If you were ever in a relationship where everything is smooth sailing, then I think first of all, and it's not Jordan Peterson, this is the Bible. First of all, it shows that you're perfect and you've made it, and two people are in perfect relationship with each other, which is of course not going to be the case. And number two, I also think that if you have a relationship without conflict, then there is a lack of communication. So these are just some preliminary thoughts from the both of us. Still just trying to decide who is going to decide for dinner tonight. And that's our argument.
Bought already.
So maybe someone here can decide what you're going to have for dinner later. David, you seem to have a lot of facial expression when Marianne was talking. What do you have to say about conflict?
Linda and I have a lot of conflicts. Not in a bad way, but in an understanding way, okay? Because Linda doesn't play game, I play game. I eat pork intestine, pork brain, and things like that, and Linda doesn't. And so that always comes up on our conversation. And
you fight on your diet.
Sorry, what you say?
You fight because of your different diets.
We did, because Linda is very organic, healthy, nuts, hamster food kind of diet.
What's so bad?
There might be a conflict coming up out of this video.
Yeah, because
Careful, David.
David, your girlfriend watched this video.
Yeah, no, it's true. So because when we cook, we send photos to each other, and the photos she sent me is always pumpkin porridge, red egg soup, and all this kind of thing. And then I always send her ribeye, salted baked custard fish, things like that. So, I mean, one of the things that we talk about was, if we were to get married, then how? Because Linda doesn't touch beef. She doesn't. She can't stand the smell of beef and ribeye. So every time when we go, if she comes over to KL and we go to fancy restaurant and eat, it's I always have to take into consideration that is fish or vegetable on the menu. Yeah, so things like pure beef restaurant, things cannot lah. So I think one as cliche as it sounds, one point to dissolve conflict is to really compromise lah. Yeah, is to really think about. I think to always put the others first before you, and yeah.
Yes,
So if it's good that you talk about compromise, but a question I would throw is who compromises? Will she say like, you know what, David, you can do whatever you want, maybe I'll try eating beef, or would you be the one who compromise? So like I know both parties have to compromise, but does that mean both parties have to compromise, or one party compromise and not?
I would say both party compromise, because usually what happens, okay, is that she will always let me pick the restaurant. Okay, so I have in control the menu. Okay, and then in terms of actually she compromised most lah actually. Yeah, and then other than that, sometimes when I order things like ribs and steak, just to show face that she is actually compromising, she'll say, okay lah, give me try a bit lah. Then I'll cut very small pieces, so small, it's like that, and then feed to her to eat, and then she say, okay lah, that's good enough for tonight. Yeah, but I would say one thing. This very interesting incident about conflict. I think in my past relationship, I have met people who throw out "let's break up" as a sort of it's like when they have conflict, oh, let's break up lah. I've heard this and experienced it myself as well. I think it's particularly interesting how some people would suggest, let's just break up, but they actually don't mean it. They just want to show that they have the gun on the table, and if you don't like me, I can always go to somewhere else. This is very interesting. I think it's a very interesting point about conflict. I've met people who are like that. Yeah, what do you think?
Yeah, same. I've also met people who like that, where they got conflict and everything, and then really the girl will just say like, okay lah, if you don't like, I break up, and then they just leave it like that. Then suddenly 1-2 weeks later they say, why they're back together? Yeah,
So can I ask another question? Is there like an empty threat? Is it something like that either party uses to threaten the other party so that the other party gives in? Yeah, I don't know. But did we never, in our conflict, unless it was escalating to a serious point, like for instance, when we decided that maybe the marriage couldn't work because of sickness, right? So you really want to call off a wedding for the better of the other half. You don't usually just throw out the threat and say, okay, let's break up. Yeah. So is it just an empty threat, or is it just a refusal to confront conflict?
In my past relationship, one incident where I broke up with my ex was true like that. Yeah, because she was using the phrase so often, and I remember, it's a big confession lah. I was dating a non-believer, and she was a non-believer, and I couldn't take it already. After 2 to 3 years, I was like, oh, cannot, please, God. And then she just said, okay lah, if you don't love me, you don't like me, we break up lah. To her astonishment, I took the gun and I said, okay lah, break up. And that was how my relationship ended with this non-believer girlfriend. And it hurt her quite badly lah. And then only I actually realized that it's actually an empty threat. Yeah.
So she never thought that you would actually cave in and say, okay, then let's end it lah, since you're proposing this, so that's the end of the story lah.
Yeah, interesting lah. Very interesting thing about conflict that I don't know, maybe the younger generation are using very often. I so far haven't heard lah, but I could think that it come out a bit.
So, I mean, just following up on conflict leading up to breakups, according to all of you here, what are some non-compromisable conflicts that should or can lead to a breakup?
I have one.
Yeah,
Maybe
sure,
it's
Dylan.
when you, maybe not so much just the values, but your future, how you would imagine it, like just clashes, like just like it's just like a brick wall, and like you know, you see no point continuing because like there's no goal anymore. Like you see the goal, it would just be like, yeah, maybe like this person doesn't even want a family or doesn't even want kids, and then the other person wants kids, and then like bam, it's like wow, this is like very hard to even like talk about it. Yeah, I'm not even talking about same religion or different religion, but just like even within like for example, if you want to go full-time and then the other person says no, I don't want you to go full-time, like what can you do after that? So like yeah, that can happen. And I think maybe you can talk it out, but if there's no solution for it, like this conflict would bound to continue on, like even if you think you can, oh, let's work it out, but this will always be in your mind. And then like even if they, let's say, really did get married, and every day they'll be haunting you like, oh, is my wife or significant other going to be okay with my decision? Unless you really have talked it out and like resolved it. If not, like I think it's like a reasonable reason to either talk it out properly, and if it really doesn't work, just find someone else.
Yeah,
I think
yeah.
I would say another reason is if it comes to a point where it compromises your Christian growth or holiness. I think one of the main points of conflict, especially when dating, right, is always like the physical boundaries, right? Like how far do you go? And sometimes there's a party that wants to push boundaries a lot. And then there maybe is another party that recognizes that this is not right. But in just throwing things out and talking, right? And if one party doesn't want to give in, and you recognize that in not giving in, you are ultimately going to compromise holiness. You're going to compromise wanting to please God, or like wanting to please the other person over pleasing God. Then and there's just no way forward, right? In the sense, because that person will not give in. And maybe even calling in a third party to intervene doesn't even work, right? Because I would always say that we try everything, right? Then maybe at that point, there is room for saying that this relationship is not going to work out.
Just one question very quickly, something that popped up in my mind. Is there such thing as killing conflict with the love and the grace of Christ? Practically, is there such thing? I'm very bad at it, because whenever Linda and I have conflict, we get very critical. Yeah, maybe that's the way. We get very critical. We say like, this is what you did wrong, this is what you did wrong, you need to change this, you need to change this. But is there like a way where we say, I love you, my family love you, God loves you, don't do this kind of stuff, I understand that I think maybe one of it is the difference if there's a situation where compromise godliness and righteousness. But other than that, what other type of conflict, we'll have to switch this. Yeah, maybe I ask Ethan. But you and Taiko come share some light.
I feel like, like different people deal with conflict differently. So for me, I would want to talk about it straight away, and I would like be as logical as I can, but at the same time, I'm be biased on that, right? But then for B needs like 1 or 2 days to process, and then he will always think it's his fault, even though like it's very clearly my fault, and I'm angry at myself, and I just want to like say it. But then he'd be like, no, it's because of me. Then I'm like, no, it's me. It's just like after a while, we just argue about like it's very pointless lah. But sometimes I would say that like you need God's wisdom to know like when to not say stuff, or when you like maybe just need some time. yeah, I wouldn't say you straight away switch mode to like, it's okay, God loves you. But yeah, like definitely make sure when you are saying stuff also is like you're saying it out of love and out of like you want to kind of see eye to eye eventually. Yeah, I think like it's okay to talk and like if you need to say it, just say it. And then after that, like maybe the next day then you come back and reevaluate and say like, oh, I think the way you said it could be nicer, like the tone or like your choice of words. Or you can like instead of like accusing the other person, you say like how that made me feel. So it's like more on like instead of like pointing the finger at the other person, is you talk more about yourself, then the other person can kind of understand you better instead of just like you whatever. Yeah, so I think that's something that we kind of learn throughout our dating process.
Yeah, I think one of the way, I mean, in dealing with conflict, I think the way you deal with conflict could also need a compromise. So, for example, as Ethan just mentioned, I think she needs to deal with it directly. She needs to deal with it now. She's that type of person. Um, I'm the type of person where I need to process. I need to really think who, what actually happened, who said what, how could it have been better. I can't change what happened, but I analyze the heck out of things. I'm that type of person, right? Because I want to make correct decisions. I want to make sure that I don't say things that I regret later on. um I'm just that type of person, right? So I can go on analyzing for days. So I guess, especially early on in our relationship, what happened was, um we had this conflict lah, about we were conflicting about how we deal with conflict, right? So yeah, so it was difficult in that sense, but until we sat down with a mentor, and he actually explained to us that he and his wife also had this issue lah. One of them was a very direct, now need to handle kind of person, and he and the other party was a need to process long time kind of person, and their compromise with that was actually, um, they they said, okay, the person who needed longer time to process actually said, give me some time to process, but I will come back to you in 2 or 3 days. So in 2 or 3 days, like, they made it a point so that the other person isn't also just left hanging. Hey, I want to deal with it, but you you are not saying anything, you're not doing anything, we are not handling anything. So at least give yourself that process time, but give yourself a deadline, give yourself, a time frame, so that the other person is also, you also take into consideration the other person lah. um so in with your question about, killing conflict with the love of Christ, I will say that, how it connects to my story is because in a relationship you will learn not just, how to deal with conflict as a very general rule. I think you will learn how the other person, the other party, deals with conflict. Because as Ethan mentioned, I think each person deals with conflict very differently. And if I don't learn the way Ethan deals with conflict, we are going to have issues. Even though I may say, oh, I'm a youth advisor, I'm a SU person, I know how to deal with conflict with young people and youth and all that. How I deal with each person is actually very different. Some people can take something very harsh and very direct. Some people may not be able to. So me, for example, when I am emotionally, filled up, my head is, confused emotionally, and there's a lot of emotions going on. I personally don't like someone, as one of our own speakers recently said, like, throw the Bible down your throat. I personally don't like that, because I've lived in a Christian household, all my life. My parents are Christians. So just throwing out verses and Christian cliches don't work for me. That's just not the type of person. In fact, I get more angry, because for me, you're just telling me things that I know, that we, even though we know we can't really do anything about it now. So because of emotions that get into the way lah. So I would say you need to learn to know how the other person accepts correction and accepts a rebuke, and it's something I think Ethan and I are still learning, and I think we will learn for the rest of our lives lah. Yeah.
Yeah, I have a very vivid memory, and it's like, you know, in terms of like, it still goes on the line of David's question of like, you know, do you like
Kill
show
conflict.
Bible verses and
Yeah.
kill the conflict with the love of Christ? I do think that the love that we have for Jesus and one another can overcome conflict, you know, but it doesn't always have to be in the form of like giving you a sermon or a lecture.
Yeah, correct.
So I remember like I had a lot of issues in the beginning of our relationship dealing with like insecurity. I had this, if you've watched like this old movie like The Runaway Bride, yeah, I'm that kind of person. Like, so I get into a relationship and I really love that person dearly, but I'm very afraid that person will abandon me. And there is this like simple part of me that says, okay, you better get out of this relationship and be the one to leave it and not be left. And of course, it has to do with my past as well. I was abandoned by like central figures in my life, and I think that impacted me very greatly, especially male figures in my life. So I felt abandoned. And I remember there was a point of time where Daniel and we had that conflict in which it was my fault. Clearly, I wanted to end the relationship because I was afraid of being abandoned. Yeah. And I just wanted to abandon him. And I remember that Daniel, it was a day we just went out. We actually, he tried to bring me out to hang out in some places to see if we could work things out. And he never really said anything. By the end of it, I just told him like, I think we should break up lah. No logic sense to it, just my insecurities. And he didn't say anything.
We cry lah.
He just cried. Yeah. We cried. And my head, and because of the way he wasn't shouting at me and he wasn't pushing me and asking me for reasons, right? He was willing to give in. I think in my head, there was a war going on, you know. I think it was like, you know, maybe it was the Holy Spirit convicting me saying like, this is crazy. You have a man whom you know loves you, who is up to this point where he is willing to give in to what is really painful, and you're just at the start of this relationship, and you're going to let this like crazy idea of insecurity and maybe idolizing, you know, your own security or whatever, or like, you know, take over and just destroy this relationship. And so I turned the boat around and I actually told him, oh, I can't do it. And a big crying fest, and we were back together again. And
I'm so confused.
Yeah. And I think after that, until the point where it was really a life and death issue, like a health and sickness issue, like really could we journey on, we never really raised that problem of wanting to break up. So something in me changed. I think God changed me that night. Yeah. And helped me see what I would stand to lose if I was just going to give up on a godly man like Daniel. Yeah. And he won me over with Christ's love, not in that he preached to me, but then he was willing even to a point to say, okay, if it really is what you want, then so be it you know.
I think what Marian said is very important, because I think we've experienced it in our relationship as well. Earlier we were talking how David was talking how you know, people can just use conflict as a excuse to break up, right? To say like, hey, just you don't like me, then break up lah. I think it's very important to discern when it is a threat versus when it is coming from a place of insecurity. Some people use it as a threat, you know, hey, let's break up. Some people not use it, but some people say it because it comes from a place of insecurity. And I think we need to be very discerning about that lah. Yeah, if it comes from a place of insecurity, I think there's a need for some sort of assurance or encouragement, or, you know, a little bit of a nudge or a push, you know. But I think if it comes from a place of threat, some serious conversations need to be taken place lah. Yeah.
I have a quick bonus question, okay? I'm asking this.
What, you game show host now? Is it what bonus question or lightning round?
It's a therapeutic session now.
I'm asking this mainly for myself, and I just want to ask this to the guys, okay? Because my girlfriend asked me a very interesting question, okay? She said that she has seen a lot of her friends who are in a relationship. And you know, women being slightly emotional, sometimes when they start being emotional and feel like they want to they're emotional, and then maybe they say the wrong things, they get a bit emo, and then conflict is brewing up already. I don't understand. And I mean, it feels like it gives the sense that men have to take it. We have to embrace the sometimes girls just being a bit emo, and then we have to manja. Because for me, I always call Linda out. Like if I realize Linda coming out a bit of like maybe a bit emo already, then I will straight away call her out. And then she
What
said,
if I call her out?
I say you're being emo, you're being
you're being
unreasonable.
emo. Be careful, because don't get so emo, later we have conflict. Just cool down a bit. So I feel like that. But what is manja? And maybe
You should ask the girls, not
Yeah,
the
I
guys.
feel like the girls have more to say about this.
Yeah, like the guys, we all are blur as you, man.
We can only answer how to react, but we don't know what. Actually, we just discern that way.
So now, David, your question to the guys or to the girls? Do you want to redirect?
Both sexes lah.
It's so funny because the way you describe it, right? In Daniel and my relationship is exactly the opposite. So Daniel is more sensitive as a guy, and he has an Eeyore mode, in the sense that he goes into this very sad mode. Eeyore, like from Winnie the Pooh. And I'm trying to understand him. And so when he gets really sad, all I can do is tell him, I'm sorry, did I do something wrong? Can you tell me what's going on?
And that's where the conflict happened, because Marianne does the same thing also sometimes. And all I have to do is like, I'm sorry. and sometimes like just thinking back to what Joelle was saying just now, is I think guys have a tendency like, okay, girls have a tendency like, okay, I want to solve the issue now. Okay, but guys have a tendency like, I want to process it. But sometimes to the girls, right, they would say that everything is okay, nothing to talk about. But after a while, it's like the volcano erupt.
That vocabulary about females, it's okay, I'm fine, and it actually means something else.
The other way. It's like, I don't know where I'm going now.
I just wanted to say what I think what Kwang is going to say also. I think Daniel and I work more similarly. I don't think all guys think that way. I don't think all girls think that way either. That's why I say it just depends on the other person, because I think to David's question, your question was, should you manja the girl if the girl is getting emo? Is that your question? Yeah, there will be times where you are emo, but you are not going to admit it. The fact of the matter is, if you have space to manja your girlfriend, then just go ahead and do it lah. I mean, it's to your discernment and to your discretion to do it. But I'm very sure if I had Linda on this call, whether she has ever manjad you before, I'm very sure she would have said yes. So there are times where you will have to manja her, and there will be times where she will have to do the same to you. Am I not right?
Agree.
Kwang, you wanted to say something? Sorry. Who was that? Ethan. Okay, sorry.
David, I think you just have to listen carefully, and after a while you understand. Like sometimes she just want you to listen. Wait. Sometimes she just want you to listen. But sometimes it's like it's building up. So you can say like, okay, you're getting a bit emotional, but then you don't say it like in a mean way lah. You just say it nicely. Yeah, like I think the tone is very important. And then then like you have to see how it progresses, lor.
Yep. Yeah. Kwang, yes, you are going to continue what I was going to say. Not always the girls are the ones who are direct. The guys are direct too, but it just depends on who the guys are.
Yeah, exactly. I see you took the words right out of my mouth. But the thing, I want to throw maybe an observation. I don't know if it's true. I agree totally that there are times where the guys will manja the girls will manja the guys. So as in it is two things. And David, I feel like you can just say all these things because Linda is not here. Okay, but another on that point, I don't know whether this observation is correct, and I don't know, maybe this is something we can discuss, which is, it does seem like how much someone manjas also depends on whether you are the person who handles conflict in a direct way or handles conflict in a need a few days to process way. Because for me, I am the kind who conflict come, I want to talk about it. I need to talk about it. Actually, that's one of the reasons why I broke up with a previous girl, because she was the one who needs a few days to process it. I was the one who was, no, I want to talk to you about it now. So I accused her of sweeping things under the rug, and she accused me of being too confrontational and impatient. And wow, that was a heated argument. And I realized that times of manja come when she's, when she's in the period of thinking about it. That's where I realized that that's where I wouldn't use the word manja lah, but just assurances and just talking about it and just say like, hey, don't worry, we'll get through this and talk about it. And I don't know, it does seem like the people who need the manja, I wouldn't use the word manja, but need the encouragement, are those who need that time to like, hey, okay, I need time to process it. So, it is a time, and for those of us who are a bit more confrontational and who say like, when you talk about it out, maybe to not say manja, but give the assurances and encouragement during that time. It depends on how you handle conflict, then you see which sort of manja you are. I don't know if that's a correct observation to take, or
I would disagree. Because I feel that the whole idea of manja or care, right, will take different forms for different people, whether you are a more confrontational person or whether you are a more, I have to think about it and process it kind of person. But I would like to throw in another thought. I think it's also to be self-conscious about when you are getting emotional. So okay, I know that there's lots of guys on this chat, but I'll just be honest. Girls, sometimes we have the hormonal changes it's the time of the month, right? And you can't help it. I mean, I don't know if it affects even as much as it affects me, but I do know that I will become very down, that I will start to see the world in a very bleak way in the few days leading up to the time of the month, right? And usually I had to catch myself in it. I will probably have to, halfway when I'm sad and telling Daniel something like the whole world's going to end, I catch myself in that thought and I tell him, I say, I think it's my time of the month. And then Daniel will know how to respond because he knows what I'm going through. He knows that it's hormonal changes. He knows that sometimes I wouldn't say it's not me talking, but it's like the hormones affecting the way that I respond to things. So that even if it's just a small thing, I tend to see it like just at that moment as something I cannot solve. And then he will be there to provide the reassurance or the manja. So he's like, don't worry, it's going to be okay. But at least I let him know.
Yep.
The reason why I'm acting this way and I recognize it is because, there is this hormonal change going on. And so he knows how to respond to me and give me the manja that I need. So sometimes I think it's also self-awareness. So maybe for guys, it's not necessarily the time of the month. Sorry about that. But whatever else that you guys are going through, then you sometimes need the girl to know and say, I'm feeling very down. This is the reason why I'm going through this. So that the girl will know how to support you. Yeah, through the emo phase and manja you. Yeah. Or at least I think I prefer giving encouragement, assurance, and comfort.
I think it helps a lot to deal with conflict when you are aware of your own self. I think when you when you aren't too aware of the way you deal with tough times or the way you deal with certain emotions, then it's harder and then you expect the other person to deal with it better than you can. It's like, wow. Yeah. So I think sometimes, it's like, don't let the small things get bigger than it needs to be. And really you have to, I would say that it's good to always try to end on a good note. And talk about when you're going to kind of talk deeper into it, don't, and always don't bring up the past conflicts and stuff. I think we haven't talked about that yet. Don't bring up other previous conflicts that you said you've forgiven and all that.
Bringing up past conflicts and grievances is this typical thing that always happens in a relationship. But I think Ethan is right in a nutshell in saying that shouldn't be something that we do when conflict arises.
Yeah. Maybe I just want to throw out one question to Mary and Daniel very quickly. How has conflict looked different now, or dealing with conflict? How does it look different now that you're married versus how you were when you all were dating? Like what you were saying just now about what you warned Daniel about if it's your time of the month. Would you have told him that prior to marriage?
No, I think I mean, and they can I think it's a growing process how to handle conflict, and even how to handle conflict in that one relationship. You know, it's also a growth process. I don't think, and also it was also a process of individual growth, right? So I don't think I would have had the maturity to catch myself in noticing that, okay, maybe just for example, it's the time of the month and I realized that I don't act like myself. I become extremely pessimistic for a couple of days leading up to that time of the month. I don't think that looking back at our courtship when it happened, right, that I would have caught myself in that awareness and be able to share it with Daniel. I also think that when you're in courtship, sometimes you try to display the best side of yourself. There is that tendency and there's ability to hide things. But when you are married and you're living with a person 24/7, the person sees every part of you.
Like Marianne will never know that I'm a EO. Just she married.
Yep.
Yeah. I always thought Daniel was a bright and sprightly guy, but he was actually sprucing up and happy, making himself.
It's like kind of like compliment each other. It's like, okay, there was time like Marianne was. I think at the very beginning of our relationship, I think Marianne always has a tendency of being the person that is like feel down all the
because
time.
Of the health issues.
Yeah, of the health issue and things like that. So I was there to like, okay, compliment her to be the bright person. And so when Marianne's become more stable, then the real side of me is showing up. It's like, okay, I'm the one who always show the negativity and things like that. Yeah.
And then it's my turn to be there to support Daniel in whatever issues that he's facing. Yeah, so I think there's definitely a change. But I think that as you grow deeper and you move into one level of relationship to another, right, the transparency and the trust that builds actually grows. And prayerfully, of course, individually also you grow and mature as a person. I would not have handled, I mean, the reason why Daniel was saying I was very down when we were in our courtship was because I didn't know how to handle facing health challenges properly. But even in our marriage, I think as we were facing health challenges together, seeing Daniel's love for me, seeing God's grace at work in my life also enabled me to change my perspective and deal with hardships differently, so that Daniel also it makes it easier for Daniel to support me. And it's come to a point where I also in turn can play my part in supporting Daniel when he is in his like rainy mood. Yeah.
Obviously speaking, the conflicts that you have in marriage is way more different and a bit more, you admittedly say it is more challenging than that of the conflicts that you face in dating, right? If the conflicts that maybe came up during your marriage came up during your dating phase, would you have broken up then? Because it seems like the thing that keeps you guys together, definitely, is there's commitment of marriage and everything. But if were there conflicts that you think that if it happened while you were courting, that it would have been a deal breaker? Yeah, because as if they are just throwing this question out because there are people who say that, oh, you need to experience every form of conflict first, then only you can sure whether you get married or not. Yeah.
I thank God for the safeguard of marriage as a commitment, right? Because there's definitely a difference. I mean, for one thing I know is like, if I knew I was losing my sight and Daniel and I were going out, the conflict would arise. I wouldn't want Daniel to be with somebody who has a disability, right? We'd probably be at square one again. And I don't know whether if I was with Daniel at that time, whether I could pull through, being together with him and having the conscience of saying, I'm going to be dragging a man with me for the rest of my life. I know not every disabled person thinks of it that way, but this is just personally that struggle. But that is where the commitment and this gift that God has given, which is marriage, helps you to live with it, because that's not going to be an option to say, bail out. And so that's for me. You any thoughts?
No, don't think there's anything that would change.
I think as someone in the dating or courtship phase, and maybe Ethan can add on if she wants. The one thing that has helped us in a lot of sense, even when we have been so different as people has been that when we come together and talk about stuff, we've been as honest as we possibly can. You know, we've not, I don't think we've tried to hide things, and we've talked about, like even just now when you mentioned about family, even before we met each other's family, we talked about, you know, what our relationships are with our mom, with our dads, with our siblings, you know, with our extended family, who we are close to, who we are not close to, what are possible weaknesses that we see in our families. These are things that we were honest and we really talked about very, very early on, so that it wouldn't come on as a surprise. Or even if we do something that seems out of character to each of us, we can explain why. You know, because there are sides of myself that maybe Ethan hasn't seen yet at that time. So when it comes out, I can explain to her why it was like that, or she can explain to me why she acted in a certain way, because we've been talking about it to each other very early on in our relationship. Yeah. So I mean, the one advice I can at least give is talk a lot and talk as honest as possible. Be as honest as possible from very early on. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think like when you, I mean, there is the inevitable, like you will have to experience stuff together, and you will see that like different experiences will cause the person to react differently. And then like from those reactions, then you can kind of build and get to know the person better. And yeah, there will definitely be opportunities to like talk things out. And I think as long as the other person is willing to, or like, yeah, and like willing to get help, or willing to talk about it, or willing to work on it, then I think it's okay. Yeah. But definitely like marriage is a commitment. And my brother who got married last year, he was like, if I knew, then I would just get married earlier, because like, yeah, if, after you get married, you're still gonna work things out. So it's like you don't need to wait so long. Like as long as the person has kind of like the same goal, same direction in life, you're serving and you're running towards Jesus, and like you can tahan each other, then get married. That's what my brother said lah. Then I'm like, okay.
Yeah, Evan's brother kept
It's
advising us
impossible
get
to
married
work
earlier.
out every conflict
Yeah.
before you get married.
Yeah. Okay, I guess we are almost at the end. Before we end, what in 30 seconds, just what is one advice you have in dealing with conflict?
Give it some time. Don't lash out immediately. You know, when there's a one advice that says when you're angry, count to 10 before saying anything. And I think that's a good advice. Or maybe even wait until the next day. Because my other half, my girlfriend, she's that kind of people that like David's. She will want to say, she want to talk. So when I'm stressed, I want to run. So I find it that after a while, she'll realize that, oh, maybe I'm angry in the wrong way or something. Then it's easier to talk at that time. So I would say that wait.
Yeah, thanks, Yong. Dylan?
For me, I don't know. I have two conflicting thoughts. Like one is like the usual me is like, okay, I want to deal with the problem, but at the same time, like I bring not enough emotions to it. So my friends have called me out like, okay, you need to like also bring in emotions. If not, you're just solving a problem but not dealing with the person it is as well. So depending on what type of character or what type of personality you have, I think you need to have that awareness now of how you deal with conflicts, because you can be very direct but like totally no emotions. It's just like bam 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 bam. It's like completely heartless. I can be like that. So yeah, I think it's awareness in some of the
Okay, thanks, Dylan. Kwang?
Yeah, I think to repeat the things that we've been saying earlier before as well, is the idea of to figure out first how each party handles conflict. And I think talking about that will actually reduce the amount of conflict later on. So yeah, so do figure out how yourself and your partner handles conflict first, and then work at it from there. Yeah.
David?
For me and Linda, okay, we just spoke about this yesterday. In any conflict, feel free to call each other out, but do not forget to manja and love each other and encourage each other as well. Some conflicts may not be a conflict at all. It may not be a big thing at all. It may be just a self-created conflict.
Yep.
Be aware of that. That's it.
Okay. Thanks. Let's go Mary and Daniel first.
I would say that if we examine our hearts, very often when conflict arises, it is us wanting to get our needs, our wants, our agenda across and imposing it on someone else.
Yep.
But then when you think about what Christ commands us to do, right? That is to love your neighbor, and the closest neighbor that you can have would be, your husband, your spouse, and you're called to love them. Then there needs to be this consciousness to be putting the need and the interest of the other person before yourself. And if you're able to see things that way, then the approach to conflict will be very different, because it's not you wanting to win. It's because we often want to win, right? But it's you saying like, let's come to an understanding. Let's come to a resolution that can help both of us to grow and learn.
Yep.
Always be humble and never be ashamed to say sorry when you're in.
Yep. Thanks, Daniel and Marian.
If for the people who need to like say it now, and the other person can't take it, then you can just write it down, or you can record it or voice message yourself. And then you can listen to it back like or the next day or something, and you'll be like more calm. It's a lot better. Yeah. And yeah, just definitely pray. Praying helps with conflict for sure.
Yeah. Adding on to what Ethan's saying, asking you to write down, don't just write down the situation. I have 3 things for you to write down. These are things that Ethan and I went through even when we were considering dating. The 3 questions we ask ourselves when we reflect upon conflict is the other person looking out for my best interest? And usually that answer is yes, right? Because the other person won't be looking out for your worst interest. So question 1 is the other person looking out for my best interest? The second question we ask is, was I at fault at any time? Sometimes it's very easy for us to think, what did the other person do? What the other person did this, did that. So we create a long list of what the other person did. But I think the second question we ask is, was I at fault at any point? And the third question is, what is God trying to teach me or us during this, through this conflict or through this situation? And I think these are the 3 questions we ask. If I have a bonus advice, it would be find a mentor. They have helped, mentors have helped Ethan and myself and countless number of couples through the process of courtship, dating, and even marriage. And we've learned so much from people who have gone before us. So with that, I just want to thank everyone on the SU team, and even Daniel and Ethan, for joining us in this conversation. If you haven't already, we hope that you subscribe, hit that subscribe button, click that thumbs up, like button, and we will see you on the next episode of Let's Chat Eavesdrop Edition. See you, everybody.